It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. In 1982, Roger Corman distributed a movie that received little fanfare at the time it was released, but later became both a cult classic as well as a kind of important 80s slasher, the Slumber Party Massacre. Now, what made that a cult classic is a slight sense of humor to the movie, like one of the girls eating the pizza the murdered delivery boy brought to the front door right on top of his dead body, or the fact that a plug-in electric trimmer doesn't reach for one of our heroines to join the fray against murderer Russ Thorne, or a hidden dead body in the fridge that is never seen by one of the other characters. It was a wink and a nod to the audience watching, as they themselves often joked about the various things when watching a slasher movie. Now, what made it important was that it was produced and directed by Amy Holden Jones. Jones started as an editor and actually turned down the chance to edit E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and very likely missing out on the eventual Oscar nomination for editing. And she did all of that so that she could direct her first film. But not only was a woman producing and directing the film, it was also written by a woman, Rita Mae Brown. Brown is known for being a feminist writer in the 70s, and she was the one who saw the traits of horror films of the late 70s and the very early 80s, and decided to pen her own film with the idea in mind that the primary cast would be all female, with any man outside the killer being more or less worthless. She, along with Jones, leaned into the sillier things that showed up in films like long lingering shots of naked butts or horseplay in the locker room, shower, and what have you. But the movie was still a pretty straightforward slasher in the style of the early 80s horror films. Russ Thorne escaped a mental hospital or prison and decides to go on a killing spree with a really long drill that he uses to bore into his victims. Now, for whatever reason, he focuses on a group of high school seniors, and the girls at the slumber party are eventually saved by a pair of sisters who lives next door, who help take down the killer. Now, I wanted to make the point that that Russ Thorne used this really long drill, and of course that was an entire phallic symbol. The idea that most of the time when girls were killed in slasher films, particularly in the late 70s and early 80s, they got a much more visceral, brutal death as opposed to the male counterparts. Now, granted, males would often be dispatched fairly brutally as well, but there was always something a little bit more erotic, I guess, that you could say, was built around the scenes in which the girls in the movies were killed. So, 5 years later, Roger Corman decided to directly produce a sequel. Directing the film is, once again, a woman making her directorial debut, Deborah Brock. However, it's near impossible to have a true direct sequel because Russ Thorne is dead. Well, I mean, much like with the first two films this month, we're going to move into a more supernatural angle. So with that, let's go and find out how they bring back Russ Thorne and how we follow a cult classic with maybe something of a second cult classic in a different way. The three survivors of the encounter with Russ Thorne in the original were Trish and her neighbor's sisters Valerie and Courtney. Now, Trish is nowhere to be found in this sequel, but we shift our main focus to the younger of the two Bates sisters, Courtney. Now, Courtney was portrayed as a young teenager, maybe 8th or 9th grade, while Valerie was a senior with Trish in the same class. Courtney is now a senior in high school herself, so Valerie has spent the last few years in a mental institution dealing with the trauma of that night in which Russ killed several of her classmates. Courtney herself is haunted by recurring nightmares about that night, and sometimes things that she sees in her nightmares are seen in the real world, like a dead bird on a sidewalk with a piercing of something that apparently killed it. Now, Courtney likes a boy named Matt, and Matt likes her back. She invites him to join her and her friend's garage band while they spend a weekend at band member Sheila's parents' condo, where they will practice their music and celebrate Courtney's 18th birthday. Another nightmare interrupts Courtney's sleep, but this time she gets a warning from Valerie to, quote, not go all the way. She also sees a greaser who has a drill bit at the end of his guitar, who drives the drill into someone's torso before she wakes up. This greaser turns out to be Russ Thorne, as if he was like Freddy Krueger, who is getting reincarnated through Courtney's nightmares. It's never actually directly said that it's Russ Thorne. I guess I should point this out now. But it is essentially accepted that while he is just credited as the driller killer, this is indeed Russ Thorne coming back into existence, I guess, through Courtney's trauma. So, anyway, the girls arrive at the condo and raid the booze closet and do what all girls do when they have a slumber party. They get drunk, they eat corn dogs, and dance sexily to a song on the radio. I mean, that's what they do, right? That's what I've always learned this is what I was always taught that they do in movies and such. But, and they douse themselves with champagne so that one of them, Sheila, has to take off her shirt and bra and then keep dancing. This is a very long segment in a 77-minute movie, but it's kind of great. But anyway, two of the girls' boyfriends, TJ and Jeff, show up a day early and derail the one night the girls expected to have just to themselves. Now, Courtney's dreams get a little bit worse. She dreams that Russ Thorne has killed Valerie, and then TJ, Sheila's boyfriend, nearly drowns Courtney with a prank the next day as she's trying to deal with the bad dreams that she's been having. Jeff, Amy's boyfriend, is just kind of a doofus. Sally, the girls' band's drummer, is worried about a zit that's lurking just underneath the surface of her skin. Sheila can't stop having sex or acting crazy with TJ. Courtney is having bad dreams, like when her hamburger transformed into a disembodied hand, or a turkey attacking her from the fridge, or blood flowing out of the faucet in the bathroom tub. It's really been a fun weekend so far, if you ask me. But Matt arrives, and it might be a good thing for Courtney, but Sally has gone missing. Sally complained about the fastest growing zit that she's ever had, and Courtney actually sees the zit growing and growing and growing on the girl's face until it pops and sprays the pus everywhere, which also seemingly kills Sally. Now, when Courtney goes and tells all of her friends about it, no one believes her, but they cannot deny Sally's missing. So they start to think that there might be, somebody out there messing with them or possibly stalking them. And then they start to wonder if the running trash compactor in the kitchen might contain Sally's body. But she does eventually return, getting everyone in trouble with the cops that they called to try to help them locate Sally, and they all basically start to think that Courtney is starting to go a little crazy. Matt attempts to have a private birthday party for Courtney, which leads to some sexy times, but she tries to tell Matt that she's never gone all the way with another guy. Russ Thorne, then completely reincarnated, hearing the magic words of going all the way, then drills through Matt's body and kills him. Courtney runs downstairs to the rest of her friends, where they do see that she is this time covered in blood, and Russ starts to pick them off one by one. He injures TJ before killing Sally. Jeff, Amy, and Courtney try to escape in his car, but they forget to check the back seat where Russ is waiting for them. He then kills Jeff while the others run away. Elsewhere, Sheila has been trying to help TJ get help for his injury, but with no luck. Russ catches up to them and kills TJ and pursues Sheila. Now, Courtney can't get help from the cops because of the earlier call about Sally going missing when she really wasn't missing, and they believe these kids are just pranking them. Sheila gets back to the condo, but while she tries to get into the room that Amy and Courtney have barricaded themselves into, Russ performs his own song and dance, and basically dances his way toward her and drills her to death too. He then drills into the bedroom the girls are hiding in, and they escape across the rooftops of the completed and not yet completed condos and various other buildings of this new neighborhood that Sheila's parents bought their getaway condo in. Now, the girls run into the killer, and he chases them through the frame of an incomplete building. He slashes at Amy and gets her on the face and then on the back, which gives him a way to follow them thanks to her blood basically leaving tracks. That's actually kind of smart of the killer. But Amy slips off the second floor and falls to her death when Russ makes Courtney drop her friend, basically. And eventually, Courtney uses a blowtorch to light Russ on fire. And then she wakes up in bed next to Matt. It's bright, it's morning time, maybe everything was just a dream. However, as she rolls over to kiss him, he turns into Russ, and she wakes up again, but this time in an insane asylum room where a drill bit burrows up through the floor. And apparently, that's how the movie ends, and that's the last time we see Courtney Bates in these two movies. She's not in the third one, but let's talk about the three things I like about the somewhat slapdash sequel, Slumber Party Massacre II. First, what makes this a completely different type of movie than the first is that the previous entry is, at least on the surface, that kind of straight slasher that I talked about earlier in the episode. I mean, the mad slasher killer is focused on a group of girls, and one by one, they get killed along with some guys. The guys in that movie are mostly useless, and it's the girls basically doing it for themselves to save the day. That's the whole point. That's the thing that gets read into more than anything over the last 40 plus years since that original one came out. The sequel features some of the same stuff. There are a couple of guys who are more annoying than useless, including one who plays a pretty shitty trick on Courtney that nearly leads to her drowning. It takes a while for the slashing to happen because the first half of the movie is about Courtney more or less bringing Russ Thorne back to life. Because it deals with a lot of dreams and visions, it also comes off as almost more stream of consciousness. That can be hit or miss for a lot of people watching, and I think there are a couple of other aspects people will connect to more with this movie, but it makes for a slightly more interesting take on the idea of a bunch of girls eventually being hunted by a guy with a giant phallic drill bit. Now, I think it might be 1987's best attempt at dealing with trauma of having to dispatch a serial killer when you were younger in a previous entry in a fledgling franchise like this. Now, second, this movie is made pretty watchable thanks to Crystal Bernard playing Courtney. Never mind that Bernard has a Texan accent, and it's very clear the Bates girls were very much intended to be the typical Southern Californians in the original, but Crystal Bernard was best known for playing the cute Helen Chapel Hackett in 172 episodes of the NBC comedy Wings. But that was after this movie. Going into this movie, she was already something of a veteran in acting. At the time of this film's release, she was in the middle of her run of 4 seasons of the sitcom It's a Living. Earlier in her career, she appeared in episodes of Happy Days and Fantasy Island. Generally, she's very likable, even if sort of overly vanilla. But she's pretty enough to have a crush on, but never the girl who was going to be too forward with you to basically turn you off or be a little too wild or anything like that. She's kind of overly perfect in terms of the archetype for the final girl. Now, of course, it's her decision to give into her sexual desires that brings Russ Thorne all the way out back into the real world and creating all the mayhem of the movie. So that's kind of interesting. But this is the type of movie that might not have really helped her career, but she was good enough to carry on a really good career in the 90s. Now, she's not the only recognizable person. She's the main thing I like about this movie, but there are also a couple of other recognizable people. Sheila was played by Juliette Cummins, who was more or less always cast as a quote-unquote sexy girl in horror films like Psycho 3 and Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Sally is played by Heidi Kozak, who appeared in Friday the 13th Part 7. Kimberly MacArthur, playing Amy, appeared in the Andy Sedaris classic Malibu Express, but also the soap opera parody Young Doctors in Love, which also featured, very early in her career, Crystal Bernard. But Bernard is the one that seems like the most serious actress in the movie, and she's obviously the most watchable part of this. Frankly, I think this has more to do with my familiarity with her on Wings by the time I ever saw this one, but still, you can tell she was the one who was going to have the more enduring career. She even dabbled in music too, which leads me to third. There are some very strange decisions in this movie. Well, I don't know if they're necessarily decisions, and I don't know if they're necessarily strange, as much as they're trying to portray teenage girls doing teenage girls things, I guess. Well, whatever it is, it's done in this movie by making Courtney and her friends a garage band, so there are multiple musical interludes. One that even includes Russ. We'll talk about that here again in just a moment. But there's a scene in which Crystal Bernard and Kimberly MacArthur being Amy, her best friend, they're singing this pop song on the radio in Amy's car on their way to school, about the song being about this guy's Tokyo convertible. I don't quite understand the lyrics of that song, but it's so goofy that you kind of love it. Then we see multiple scenes in which Courtney's band is practicing and flat out singing their own songs like they are starring in their own music videos. Let's not forget that whole scene that I mentioned earlier about the girls dancing to a song on the radio and spraying themselves with champagne so that one of them has to go topless. I mean, I guess it plays up to the idea that Russ Thorne also gets reincarnated as this 50s greaser rocker with that phallic drill bit attached to the neck of a guitar. And yeah, like I said earlier, Russ has that whole music video scene in which he closes in on killing Sheila by making it a whole song and dance sort of routine. But anyway, it's one of those things that will either be something that you will love and enjoy the quaintness of the musical interludes, or you'll end up hating it. I happen to be in the like camp because it is just that. It's campy. It's silly. It helps the movie keep a kind of lighthearted feel to it. And it helps makes this what I think ultimately a cult classic for a lot of people, just as much in a slightly different way than that original. And I think that that's why this sequel is so much separated from its original one too. You don't necessarily need to watch the first one to understand the second one. The second one kind of goes with that more supernatural slasher that you're used to at this point with like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th at this point in both of those series. So it's similar in some ways, while it is being a little bit more of a lighthearted slasher, but it's so much different, and it's got that stream of consciousness feeling to it. It's got all of the idea of resurrecting the villain through your sexual desire and your dreams and all of that. But it is also in its own right a cult classic. That wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at filmseizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure Podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieanima.com, to read new review articles every Friday morning. Next time, speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, we close out this month of sequels that took different directions from other entries in the series with an underrated 90s horror film that brings a dream demon into the real world and completes the entire franchise in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And until next week, stay spooky.